In late February 2026, it felt like the entire world was holding its breath. We were on the verge of what many hoped would be a historic peace deal between the United States and Iran. But then, in less than 24 hours, all that hope just evaporated. It was replaced by the fire and chaos of open war. So how did it all unravel so incredibly fast? Let's break down the final hours that pushed these two nations right over the brink.
Peace was within reach. Just think about those words. They came from Oman's foreign minister, the guy right in the middle of mediating these incredibly tense negotiations. On February 27th, he was so confident he actually told the press a breakthrough had been made. But what he didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that behind the scenes, a clock was ticking down to zero, making his optimism tragically misplaced.
Okay, so to really understand how everything fell apart, you have to look at the talks themselves. In those final days, shuttling between Muscat and Geneva, there were two completely different stories playing out at the same time.
And here's where you can see that divide so clearly. Publicly, you had Iranian officials talking about a historic agreement, hammering home their crystal-clear position against ever-developing nuclear weapons. But then you have the account from the U.S. envoy, Steve Witkoff. He said that, in private, the tone was totally different. He reported that Iran was boasting about having enough material for 11 nuclear bombs and absolutely insisting on its right to enrich uranium. There was this huge chasm of mistrust, hiding just under the surface of all those optimistic headlines.
And this is where the story just pivots on a dime. Because while the diplomats were talking peace, intelligence agencies were about to find the one thing that would make war all but certain.
The speed of this escalation is just staggering. I mean, look at this timeline. On the morning of February 27th, you have the Omani foreign minister announcing a breakthrough. That same afternoon, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, drops an absolute bombshell. They've found hidden, highly enriched uranium. By the very next day, February 28th, American and Israeli jets are already in the air, heading for Iran.
So why was this discovery such a big deal? Well, what the IAEA found was highly enriched uranium, or HEU. You need to understand, this is the key ingredient for a nuclear bomb. Finding it, and especially finding it hidden away in an underground facility that inspectors hadn't been allowed into, well, for the US and Israel, that was the smoking gun. It was definitive proof of a secret weapons program. It was the ultimate red line being crossed.
This discovery instantly begged the question, was the attack that followed a necessary evil to prevent something worse, or was there another way? The official justifications that came out afterwards, well, they were complicated.
And this is where the official story gets really murky. On one hand, the White House went public, claiming they had solid intelligence that Iran was literally hours away from launching its own preemptive missile strike, basically forcing their hand. But on the other hand, in closed-door briefings to Congress, a Pentagon source reportedly said the exact opposite, that there was no intelligence suggesting an imminent attack from Iran. You've got two completely conflicting stories coming out of the same government at the most critical moment imaginable.
But whatever the internal debate was, the decision was made. A massive, coordinated military campaign was launched, and it was designed from the ground up to be swift, overwhelming, and absolutely decisive.
The joint campaign was officially given two code names. For the United States, it was Operation Epic Fury. For Israel's coordinated efforts, it was Operation Roaring Lion.
And the initial impact? It was devastating. In just the first 24 hours of the conflict, the US and Israel reported an 86% drop in Iran's ballistic missile launches, an absolutely staggering number that suggests a huge chunk of their ability to strike back was wiped out, almost immediately.
And just a few days into the fighting, the U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth stood up and delivered this message. It was forceful, it was unambiguous, and it sent a signal to the entire world that the United States saw this as an overwhelming success and had absolutely no intention of backing down. But the strikes weren't just about military targets. A primary goal, it seems, was to disrupt Iran's ability to even command its forces by going straight for the very top of the regime.
On the very first day of the war, the world learned that Iran's supreme leader of more than 30 years, Ali Khamenei, had been killed. A US-Israeli strike had hit his compound. And just like that, this single act plunged the entire country into a massive leadership crisis right in the middle of a war.
So what even happens when a supreme leader is suddenly assassinated? Well, Iran's constitution actually has a plan for this. An interim leadership council is immediately formed. It's a three-person team made up of the current president, Masoud Pezeshkian, the head of the judiciary, Gholam Hossein Mohseni Ejei, and a jurist from the powerful Guardian Council, Ali Reza Arafi.
Suddenly, these three men were tasked with running a country in total chaos.
But even with that decapitation strike, what was left of the Iranian military and its powerful allies across the region responded with absolute fury, and the conflict immediately and violently spilled across Iran's borders. Iran's response was called Operation True Promise 4, and it was immediate and widespread. We're talking ballistic missiles and drones targeting U.S. bases in 7 different countries. Israel itself was hit with direct strikes. The Strait of Hormuz, that critical artery for the world's oil supply, was shut down. And up to the north, Iran's powerful ally, Hezbollah, opened up a whole new front against Israel from Lebanon. The regional war everyone had feared for decades was now here.
Which, of course, brings us to today. The initial strikes crippled Iran's command structure and a huge part of its military, but they also ignited a firestorm across the entire Middle East. Now, with a leadership vacuum in Tehran, a military in tatters, and its enemies all mobilized, the path forward is dangerously unclear. The real question isn't just about how this war will be fought, but how, or even if, it will ever truly end.